Laurie Huston's News for the Heart is dedicated to helping you give a voice to your own soul. Our hearts have the power to free us from pain and the struggles that keep us from awakening to our true essence. Join Laurie now as we delve into our heart and soul to find the path that will open us to the possibilities and lead us to the life we love to live.
And good afternoon. This is News for the Heart. And today I have, my favorite, no, I really shouldn't say that, should I? Well, yeah, you are. You're my favorite guest.
All your other guests will all be unhappy.
I know, right? But hey, you've invited me over to the UK for workshops, so you definitely made the best list.
Yeah, that's coming up soon, too.
Coming up really soon.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, my guest, as you know, is Tom Campbell, who has done so much and is so amazing. I always love to have you on the show. And so we're coming up to the new year. We like to talk about New Year's resolutions or New Year's intentions, and we kind of sneak in the addictions part here because a lot of the times we're looking at the, stop smoking. For me last year, it was stop eating sugar. And I have to say, probably only a handful of times this year have I had more than I should have of sugar. So I did pretty good. The only thing I still do is I have a tea, and as long as the tea has 1 gram or less of sugar, then I go for it. But there are some really yummy teas that have more than 1 gram, but that's okay. I digress. So sugar was fine. Alcohol, that's not really one of my big things anyway. Probably that might be 2 hands, but I'm thinking at least less than once a month, and that's pretty good. But as for all of our other stuff, they say this year it's fitness or exercise more and then lose weight. We were just discussing before we started the show that usually people start fitness to lose weight, and I really think that is true. Although, with all the gadgets that they have, I have a Fitbit. I got a Fitbit right prior to last New Year's so that I would, so it was to help me lose weight and to stop sugar and get more active, which, 2 of those things really happened well. Not so much, but hey, I'm getting there. That's this year's goal. But yeah, we set these New Year's intentions or these New Year's resolutions, and usually by January 5th, we've already stopped them because, it's a mental issue. And we talk about this, and we still are going to talk about it because this is kind of, everybody still does it. Everybody still sets these, New Year's resolutions right before the beginning of the year. And, they get really focused on them. And of course, the failure is pretty high because it's coming from the wrong intentions. It's coming from a place of fear, of maybe from our last show, not liking ourselves. It's one of those areas that we really need to look at and figure out why. I mean, for me, the Fitbit was great. I hooked it up in Canada. We have something called Carrot Rewards, although our new premier decided to do away with it this year at the end of the year. But then you can buy it. So to inspire me, I did buy the lowest package, $19 for a year sort of thing. We'll double my points. So this year I got 2.5 movie theaters. Or movie theater tickets. I'm thinking by next year I should have at least 5.
Oh, that's good. Sounds like progress.
Right?
And maybe instead of just reducing sugar, you actually will stop it in the coming year. It's hard to say.
Getting rid of my teas. Not that most of the teas just are usually fruit, but sugar is sugar.
Yes.
Hey, if I get down, I pretty much, under the 20 grams a day concept, and as long as I'm under that, I'm pretty happy with myself.
So what's the ratio between the connection between grams and teaspoonfuls?
Oh, there is, I believe it's teaspoon has maybe 10 grams. I should know this, right?
I did know it, but
Yeah, teaspoon.
since I've
Might
looked.
be higher. Oh, no, 4.2.
4.2 what?
4.2 grams in a teaspoon of sugar. So
4.2. So 4.2 into your 20, it's about 5 teaspoons of sugar.
Yeah,
A
I don't
day.
do that, but the only thing that actually has sugar in it, because it comes in it, is my teas. But again, only taking the teas that have 1 gram or less. So the most I would have is like 3. The absolute most would be about 3 grams of actual sugar. So yeah, maybe it could get down, but then I would be giving up my teas, and I just don't want to do that. I am a tea crazy person.
Well, you could maybe find some other teas that didn't have sugar in them that were just as good, just as satisfying.
I don't know, that you're hurting me.
Yeah. Well, that's we can only do as much as we're willing to do, right?
Well, this is it, right?
That's it. And most of us, our resolutions, at least you stayed by your resolution and you did reduce sugar, for the year. That was
And I
good.
definitely increased my exercise, although
Yeah.
in the summer when it was so hot, that was a little tough, but hey, I'm working on it. So then I started walking at night, and that made it a little bit better.
Yeah. The other strategy is go to a big indoor mall.
Well,
and you can do your walking there and shop at the same time. So
when it's nice, I go swimming.
uh,
Quite do as many but yes.
Anyway, we do we do have limitations on how much we're willing to put into these things. It's like we decide that we're going to do it, but there's a but that follows, and usually the but is kind of where it starts to actually squeeze us, where we start to have to give up things that we don't want to give up. Like that strawberry shortcake, for dessert or something like that. And you say, well, okay, but, I won't give up that. And there's usually limitations on how far we want to go. And even then, that strategy or that idea that we are going to limit, do something healthier, do something that's better for us, that typically comes from our intellect, because we read books and stories and we talk to other people and we watch TV and we realize that exercise is a good thing we ought to be doing, and that eating sugar is not such a good thing that we should be doing less of. So we get these understandings, and then we decide, well, then I should probably exercise, and I should probably eat less sugar, and I should try to be nicer to my mother-in-law. And you come up with these things that you think that maybe you should do, but this is all part of our intellect. And as you mentioned earlier, our intellect is for the large part driven by our fears, our egos, and our ego and our belief. So as long as our commitment is coming from our intellect, it is very likely that it won't last very long. It will last just as long as it takes for us to kind of get over that, that desire and justify it with, well, it's just, one piece of strawberry shortcake. Oh, it's just the tea, that's all it'll be. Or, we start to justify it, and pretty soon that justification will slip in the next thing and the next thing. And by 3 or 4 months into the year, our resolutions have kind of gone by the wayside. And then we think, oh, well, I'm not doing it. Well, maybe next year. So that's kind of the way those resolutions go. And whether it's a New Year's resolution or just one day you decide, I need to lose weight. I need to have a better diet. I need to eat fewer chips and junk food and, eat more, vegetables. And these things are good for you, but they don't feel as good as the other things you're doing, like not exercising. Feels good because you can just, lie around, and I don't know what you would do. And I don't mean you in particular, but just what somebody would do. They watch TV, or maybe they play with their dogs and cats or go spend time with their grandchildren or whatever it is they do. Yeah. So, those things feel good. We do them because we like to do them. And if we have to let those things go, and it's the same with the strawberry shortcake and all the chocolate things. We do that because they taste good, because we like it, and we have comfort foods that make us feel better about ourselves. And to let that go is difficult.
Yeah.
You really have to want to. And your intellect will want to just until it stops wanting to, which won't take too long, because you don't want to give up the things you like. So it's a matter of your attachment to things, which is, of course, ego. And that attachment often comes out of fear for people. And that's why we have such a hard time keeping our promises to ourselves, whether it's a New Year's resolution or just one day you decide you need to lose weight because you look in the mirror and it's not a pretty sight. And you say, well, that's not healthy. I should lose weight. And for the next 2 or 3 months, you probably, are pretty good at it. But the point is, 6 months later, are you really still good at it? And a year or 2 years later, have you kind of gone back to where you were in the first place? That's the difference between an intellectual commitment and a commitment at the being level. Commitment down at the root of who you really are. And if you get these commitments at the root of who you are, at that being level, then you will stick to them, because it's not just something you're doing because you think you should. It's something you really want to do. It's something that's important to you to do. And then all the little things that get in the way, like I really like my strawberry shortcake and I like my tea and I like watching soap operas during the day, all that stuff just kind of disappears because that's no longer important, because you really want to, do what it is you want to do, your exercise or your losing weight or your meditation. A lot of people do the same with meditation. Oh, I should meditate. And for a month they try and they do it pretty regularly, and then it gets less regular and less regular to where they're kind of back where they were. So we tend to not make much progress because we're working from the intellect. That's not a very strong motivator. It only motivates us as long as we're focused on it. As soon as our focus slips, it slips away. That's kind of, I think, the key thing. And I have found that even if you have, a physical addiction, say to nicotine, you want to quit smoking. Of all the smokers in the world, probably at least half of them decide that they'd like to quit, at least once a year or more, because it's an expensive habit and mostly people around you don't like it, and it makes you go outside when it's cold, to stand on your front porch and smoke while everybody else is inside having fun. So it's kind of a negative socially now, whereas 30 years ago it wasn't, but now it's kind of a negative social thing. But people keep doing it anyway. They keep saying, well, yeah, I should quit. And they may quit for a few months, but they tend to come back to it because, again, it's intellectual. If it's a being level decision, I no longer want to be addicted, to nicotine. I no longer want to be a drug addict where I have to do this thing. Otherwise I get nervous or feel bad or whatever. I want to quit. And if you really feel that way, you'll find that the withdrawals go to zero. You don't have withdrawals. You don't have I really want a cigarette and I need all the willpower, and the willpower isn't quite enough. That doesn't happen. When you really want to do it, the withdrawals disappear. It's when your intellect says you should do it, but you don't really want to at a deep down level. It's just your intellect trying to push you. Now your withdrawals are terrible. You see other people smoking and you want to smoke. You get that cup of coffee after the meal and you want to smoke, a cigarette with that cup of coffee, and the withdrawals just nag at you and nag at you. And months and months go by and the withdrawals are still there. It's like there's this terrible price to pay to quit. That's only there because you're quitting at the intellectual level, not at the being level. That being level is still saying, give me a hit of my favorite drug. I want the sugar, I want the nicotine, I want the alcohol, whatever it is that you're addicted to. Your being level still wants it, doesn't want to quit. It's your intellect is trying to impose, but you should quit. That doesn't work. So if you really want to make a New Year's resolution or any time a resolution, first you have to decide whether or not you really want to do it, or whether you just want to pretend that you're doing it to make yourself feel better about yourself. You see, that's, I think, the biggest difference between those who succeed and those who don't.
Yeah, for me, it was really about my health more than anything. I knew that sugar was a problem, but it was more that I just wasn't feeling good. So when I go down to 20 grams, it's not 20 grams necessarily of sugar, it's 20 grams of carbs. But yeah, so the sugar portion is, less than a teaspoon.
A day. Uh-huh.
Less than, yeah.
Yeah. And that's probably good enough, isn't it?
Well,
yeah.
I still feel okay. I mean, it's not interfering with my health. Let's put that.
No.
I mean, I don't have the cake or the cookies or, the things that tend to interfere, or the breads, or, all the things that seem yummy.
And you can only eat the things that don't seem yummy, huh?
No.
Yeah.
I'm happy with what I eat. Again, that's why I think I keep my teas. But yes.
Well, that's generally preferable. I mean, to cut down on a bad habit is much better than to, indulge in a bad habit. So that's still progress, and that's still very good. And you're probably right. As far as health goes, a teaspoon of sugar a day is probably inconsequential. It's probably not going to affect your health. It'll still affect your meditations and your mind somewhat, but that's more of a subtle thing. And that's not, for the average person, that's not such a big deal. So, yeah, those, I believe in shall we say, not being, what do we call it? Not being hard over, not being obsessed with any of these ideas of better health, and like I'm a vegetarian. Actually, I'm probably more of a vegan even than a vegetarian, but I do eat cheese sometimes, and I do eat eggs, occasionally, and I even eat meat occasionally if that happens. If like I'll go into a restaurant and I'll order turnip greens or collard greens, and about half the time they come out with little chips of meat in them or little chips of bacon in them, because that's just the way people fix it in the Southeast, which is where I live. That's kind of the way they fix it. Or they soak a ham bone, in the vegetables. That kind of
I'd
thing.
Never heard of until just like very recently. I'm like, what?
Yeah. So you often in your veggies you'll get little flakes of meat, or have meat bones put in the liquid that you use to cook the vegetables in, and so on, mainly as flavor and that sort of thing. But I don't obsess over the details. If I'm traveling and I'm in airports, particularly where the food is pretty terrible, and if you get a decent restaurant, it's very seldom that they have many vegetarian things, because it's not that big a part of the population that demands that. So sometimes I will get fish. Sometimes, I'll get something that'll have little bits of chicken in it or some kind of thing like that, just because I need to eat, and there really isn't anything else that's, very acceptable available. So that's okay. The thing is, if you mostly clean up your diet, so most of the time you're eating healthy, or most of the time you are, eating the kind of diet you want, like particularly when you're home and you can control everything that you eat, then that's okay. To get too obsessed with having to, eliminate every molecule, of a substance that you don't want to eat, I think that's unnecessary. And it just puts a lot of stress on you and everybody else around you, because now you become extremely problematical as far as, okay, Tom's coming for dinner tonight. What can we serve him? He doesn't eat sugar. He doesn't eat meat. He doesn't eat preservatives. He doesn't eat artificial colors and flavors. What are we going to give him? A glass of water, and and an apple? Well, that's a problem. You make it difficult for other people. So I don't really tell people that I've got particular, dietary things. I'll often say, no sugar, please. But mostly I'll eat whatever anybody would pass to me. If I was at their house and they were serving me food, I'll eat it, and I'll eat less of it. If it has, if it's meat, I'll just let the meat go and eat the vegetables, and that'll be fine. I don't need special stuff. So I think we can break our bad habits without being obsessed with the details. And I think that is what knocks some people off the wagon, being a phrase that means that they let go, is because they become obsessive with the detail. They have to do exactly this. They have to exercise exactly 1 hour, So if they only do it for, 45 minutes, they've failed. And then they have a couple of failures, and pretty soon, well, they just can't do it. It doesn't seem to work, and then they quit. Take your 45 minutes. Take your 15 minutes. Take whatever it is you'll do and do that, and then work up to it. Don't be so obsessed with being precise that you have to do 100% and you're a failure if you don't. That's just setting yourself up for failure. It's much better to clean your diet up and only have a teaspoon of sugar a day than it is to, be chowing down on donuts and, pastries and all that, cookies and all that junk that gets passed around, particularly in the holidays.
Right. Or have a soda. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, right.
Have a soda is probably what, 20 teaspoons, or it's
something like that. Yeah, 25 teaspoons of sugar and one can of soda. Yeah, something like that. Even eating an apple is like 4 teaspoons of sugar. Yeah. So
when you say no sugar, so you're no fruit?
No, I eat fruit.
Oh, okay.
I do eat fruit. To me, the sugar is not so much a health problem for me because I eat so little of it. It's a clarity of mind problem.
Explain. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, when you meditate seriously for a long time, you get to where your awareness gets very sensitive. Exactly what state you're in, and is this a good state for doing these things or those things, or getting data from a database, or remote viewing or healing, and you get very sensitive to mental states. And if you eat sugar, your mental states become unstable because your brain works on glucose. Glucose is the kind of the coin of the realm in your body. Without those carbohydrates, you wouldn't have much energy. So your brain requires glucose to work on. And if the glucose levels are constantly changing, which they are when you take sugar, the glucose levels shoot up on a spike. And then because your body is trying to keep a kind of an equal level or a steady level, you then secrete some hormones, and that pulls the sugar down, and that then pulls the sugar down below the average. But by then you've probably taken your next bite of sugar, or your next cookie has come, and that drives it back up again. And your pancreas, will squirt out a little more insulin and bring it back down. So the average person probably has sugar every hour, every couple of hours. And that ringing from when you eat that first really sweet thing, it takes about 4 hours before your body stops ringing, stops going high to low to high to low to high to low. It doesn't just settle out like in 10 minutes. It takes a while before your body settles out. And if you want to look at the even finer grain detail, it takes about 2 weeks before that works out of your system. And that's just one mouthful of sugar. It takes a long time. So if your body is in constant flux, and if every meal you're eating, 10 or 20 teaspoons of sugar, right, 20 teaspoons in a soda, well, your glucose levels are in a constant flux. And I have found that means you're awareness, your consciousness, which is, it's affected because the conscious can only do with the body what the body, allows it to do according to the rule set. And according to the rule set, if your glucose levels are high and low and high and low and just all over the place, well, you can't really focus very finely and very precisely to a particular altered state of consciousness. So I don't do any sugar at all because the clarity of my mind is very important to me. So that's my reason for not doing sugar. It's not so much health as it is clarity of mind, because any little bit of sugar will do that. Even a quarter of a teaspoon of sugar will get your glucose level up, and it'll stay up for a while, and then it'll go down, and then it'll go back up, and then it'll go down. And all of this it's just noise in the background. When we meditate, we want to get rid of the noise. We want to just have that pure, empty space with no noise in our thoughts. And when we heal or get data or look at auras or do whatever we're doing with our mind, we want to keep that chatter out of our mind. We want to keep our mind a very low noise instrument. And the sugar just adds noise to it. It just puts background noise in. So that's my main complaint against sugar. And it is unhealthy too. I mean, there's lots and lots of studies that say sugar is just not a healthy thing to put in your body. But I've found that if I eat an apple, now I wouldn't want to eat 5 apples or 3 apples. That would be too much. Even then, I could feel my consciousness start to get flaky. But if I eat an apple, and if I eat it slowly, because the sugar is tied up in the cellulose matrix of the apple, the sugar leaks out into your system very gradually as your body digests the apple. That's a whole lot different than, eating a donut and getting, 10 teaspoons of sugar dumped in your system all in the same minute. That then puts you into an unstable state. So eating the fruit doesn't seem to bother me if I don't eat it too fast and I don't eat too much of it, just because the sugar leaches into your system very slowly with digestion. But sugar is pre-digested. When you swallow, sucrose or glucose or fructose, that goes into your bloodstream within probably 10 seconds. If you had a thing that measured sugar in the blood, within seconds after you're swallowing, you register an increase, in a sugar in your blood. It gets absorbed almost instantly by the body because it doesn't have to be digested. It's already in a form that the body can use. So the body grabs it up very quickly, which then is the reason why you get this lack of stability. So fruit's not really a problem. Some fruit. Now, there's some fruit that's just really sweet, like dates. Now I wouldn't eat a date because I've done that before, and it's just too much sugar all at once. Pineapple's pretty sweet, but I can eat some pineapple if I don't eat too much, and I'll get by with that. So the sweet fruits, bananas are fairly sweet, but I put apples and bananas in my green smoothie all the time. It doesn't seem to give me a problem. But other things, would just completely, when I take some sugar, like by accident, somebody gives me something and they say, oh no, there's no sugar in this. That's like getting an Indian at an Indian, restaurant tell you, oh, there's no spice in this. This isn't hot, and then you eat it and it lights your mouth on fire because to them it's not hot. But to you, it's uncomfortably burning. Well, a lot of people say, oh, there's no sugar in this. This is just a piece of bread. Well, yes, to my taste buds, bread tastes a lot like cake tastes to most people. There is a lot of sugar in it. When I get those accidents, I find that immediately my gums begin to ache, and then I get a headache. And then I get a feeling in my mind like it used to be in the old days when you take antihistamines. Remember how that would leave your mind kind of cloudy and fuzzy and foggy, where you just kind of could sit and stare at a wall and not notice that you were doing that because your mind was just kind of blotto? Well, I noticed that's the way my consciousness begins. Now I can force my way through it. I can, I can still focus, but it takes a lot more effort now to focus than it did before. I have to overcome, the sugar.
Interesting.
So,
Hmm.
but it's not really a big health problem. A teaspoon a day is not a health problem at all. That's basically a fourth of an apple. But it just hits you all at once when it's in your tea like that. It kind of.
That's 3 or 4 teas over the day.
Yeah, and you just sip it, right? Yeah.
Right?
You don't guzzle. Well, there you go.
Guzzle.
It's just like eating
you 4 all at once.
That's right. Just like eating an apple.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. No, it's interesting. I mean, especially when, some of there's an author that talks about bulletproof, and he, that's one of the big things about sugar is that it definitely affects your clarity. So he likes coffee, which is interesting. I mean, I can't drink coffee, so my vice is tea. And I do have a couple teas that don't have any.
Well, with tea and coffee, it's not only sugar is an addictive drug, but you also have the caffeine.
Right.
If you have coffee that's not decaffeinated and tea that is, like black tea or something that has caffeine in it, so then that's another psychotropic drug. I put sugar in that same category. Sugar is a psychotropic drug because it affects your central consciousness and your awareness, and so is caffeine.
Right.
So that's not liking sugar because it muddles your mind, but liking coffee, seems to me you're kind of fixing one problem but leaving the other one alone. Because I have that same problem. If I have something with caffeine in it, it immediately changes my state of consciousness.
Yeah, I've had that too. I mean, I can have an espresso with like a lot of milk, or like a coconut milk or something that's relative, but that's the extent. If I have more than one, I feel nauseous. I mean, I really can't drink caffeine, and most of my teas are herbal. Some are green, some are matcha. I have a big selection of teas.
Yeah.
However, yes. And obviously alcohol does something.
That's another drug. But we as a culture are very into psychotropic drugs. Now, when I say that, most people think marijuana, and then all the illegal drugs that are wandering around out there. But no, sugar, caffeine, nicotine are all 3 psychotropic drugs that happen to be legal. Well, so is cannabis in Canada. Is legal. You can add that one in Canada. But all of these are legal substances, and all of them affect your central nervous system. They affect your mind. They affect the state of your consciousness. They are drugs that give you a high. You get high on the caffeine. You get high, on the sugar. Now, it's not the same high that you get, say, on marijuana or on alcohol, but it's still a high. That's why people eat the sugar, because it, gives them, they'll say, a boost of energy. Well, what it does is that they get high on the sugar and they get high on the caffeine, and they can't start their day until they have that first cup of coffee, because they're addicts and they've gone all night long without a hit of dope, and they need a hit of dope in order to get their day going. So all of those are addictive psychotropic drugs. They just happen to be legal, so we don't pay much attention to them. But it's interesting, if you look at our culture and say, what do we do when we want to celebrate something? When something wonderful has happened, you get married, you have a baby, you get promotion, what do? Well, you either go out and have a drink, you pass around cigars, right? You have donuts, you basically consume psychotropic drugs whenever something happens that's remarkable. something good happens, you go get some psychotropic drugs. And now what do we do when something really bad happens? Pretty much the same thing, right? Something bad happens, we go out, we get a drink, right? We want to go drink some wine or, go to a bar or that sort of thing. That's our culture. We look very hard for excuses to take psychotropic drugs. And we can come up with, with a zillion excuses to take those drugs. Otherwise, we don't see them as drugs. We see them, oh, sugar, well, that's just a part of food, oh, nicotine or caffeine or whatever, that's just normal stuff and it's not a problem. But they're all addictive. They're all psychotropic. And we make up any excuse we can think of to get another hit of that dope. And we do that in the legal sense, but we have a very negative attitude about people who do exactly the same thing. The only difference is that their drugs are illegal. They get some cocaine or they get some, I don't know, whatever the other illegal drugs are, some speed or something else like that. And they do that recreationally. And it's for the same reason. If they're very sad and depressed, they want to go get some drugs. If they got something to celebrate, they want to do drugs. Oh, we just bought a new house. We're going to have a homecoming. Let's do drugs. It's just like that in our culture. We are very committed to our addictive psychotropic drugs and take them all the time. So when you have a Christmas party, what are you going to do? There's going to be alcohol served. There will be caffeine served. It's our culture. Psychotropic drugs are just in our culture. And most people cannot go without them. Matter of fact, of all those psychic drugs that we just talked about, the one that seems to be the hardest to break loose from with the most serious withdrawals is sugar.
Yeah.
Sugar one is a really tough one to let go of. It's hard. And like any addict, whether it's alcohol or cocaine or anything else, you make up excuses why. Well, just a little bit won't hurt, and then you take a little and then a little more and you justify it. That's the typical alcoholic, right? Well, just one drink, one drink won't make any difference. Of course, one leads to two and two leads to three. And pretty soon you're back where you were before. So that's our culture, though. It's not, we wonder why our teenagers go out and, doing illegal drugs. Well, they've been doing drugs since they were born almost, psychotropic drugs, and they're addicted probably to at least two or three, by the time they're 2 years old. And the fact that they do illegal drugs, well, teenagers are in that rebellious phase where they like to do things that are outside of what the society finds acceptable. That's how they learn to define themselves. So why wouldn't they do illegal drugs? It's the culture they live in does psychotropic drugs. So that's just the way kind of we are as a people. I don't know if it's like that in all cultures. I know in Western culture, it tends to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, right before we kind of legalized, I was walking on the boardwalk and there were some kids in front of me and they had, bottles of alcohol that they were drinking. It's like, in 2 days, these kids can smoke, but legally they're not allowed to have alcohol. We're not allowed to carry it outside and walk with it. But yet it's so much more socially acceptable. But, to me, alcohol, I mean, health-wise, that's the one thing I noticed the most. I mean, my body does not like alcohol. If there's too much that goes in, it comes right back out again. And it always has been that way. I mean, I've never been that's never been my addiction. I can go for months without even, I have bottles of wine in my, closet that have probably been there for, well, actually there's been some that have been there for almost, 5 or 6 years.
I have some in my cupboard that have been there for over 30 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I don't drink now. My wife Pamela, she will drink beer occasionally, particularly if you go out to eat, particularly if it's a Mexican restaurant or something that you
Salty.
get that's a little spicy or salty, with the chips and
Yeah.
so on. Then she will tend to get a beer, and I
I
maybe on the average will drink one beer a year,
Mm.
and that's usually in the summer. If I've been outside working and I've been sweating a lot, and then we suddenly decide to go to a Mexican restaurant or something, and Pamela has this beer, poured out, and I say, "Oh, that certainly looks good," and then I generally drink it quickly because I just am really thirsty, and something carbonated, seems good. So maybe once a year. I probably go through 2 or 3 years and I don't even have one beer. But then I might have 2 or 3 in a year, the next year. So maybe about one beer a year is my level of alcohol, which is just about zero. So I don't do alcohol either. I have a very strong desire to keep a clear mind all the time. So even one beer doesn't really affect your mind much. There's not enough alcohol in a beer to do that, but
Especially
the effects are still there, and it's subtle. So if you're dealing in very subtle, precise levels of consciousness, then you do notice an effect. It's not enough to make you, stumble around or slur your words or anything. One beer is like irrelevant as far as your functioning goes, but functioning at a subtle mental level, it still does make a difference, even the one. So yes, that's what makes me so difficult, I guess, to when I go places, somebody says, well, do you have any special dietary, whatever, and it's like that. Just don't worry about it. Try to give me something that doesn't have sugar and I'll be happy.
Right. Interesting. No, that's actually a good way of looking at things. It's your intention, right? It's your motivation.
Yeah.
Which is what people need to look at the clearest as to what is your motivation.
Yeah.
If it's to lose weight, if it's to feel healthier, if it's to have clarity. I mean, those are all very, very different things. And you start with one and you hopefully get to the other. But
yeah.
Yeah.
And how serious are you about it? How clear does your mind need to be? Well, just clear enough to walk and talk. Well, then you can probably drink 6 or 7 beers, and still walk and talk. But, it's to what level and how important is that to you? How important is your health to you? Well, most of us are very short-term thinkers. We only think in the short term. And if it's going to be all right for us tomorrow and the next day and the next week or two ahead, that's about as far as we think. But most of the damage we do to our body is long term. It's not that if you drank a bottle of soda, that would damage your health, and you'd have to pay the price for that the rest of your life. It's not like that. But if you drink sodas every day, then that is going to damage your health. But not in a year, not even in 10 years. It's, by the time you're getting into your later 50s and your 60s is when all this stuff starts to catch up with you. And then is too late really to fix it. You've already done the damage. So the idea is you have to think in the long term to stick with it, to really want to do it. How much do you want to do it? And if it's, well, it really is not going to make that much difference. I can pig out and do whatever, and over the next week or two, it's just not going to make that big a difference. Well, then you will. But if you feel that way every week, then it will make a difference, and eventually it will kill you. It'll take 10 years off your lifespan to do that. And it's not even so much the lifespan that's the problem. It's the quality of life. When you're 300 pounds overweight, your quality of life is just very different than if you're not. And if your mental state is always fuzzy, it's a different quality of life than if it isn't. It's a quality of life thing. When you always hear people who, I just lost 25 pounds, or I just lost 30 pounds and I feel so much better. You know, everything works better. You know, I don't have the aches and pains. I feel more spry. You know, I can move. And that's the difference in lifestyle. And you don't realize it because so slowly you put that weight on, you just don't realize what you're missing to be unhealthy, to be in an unhealthy state. So it's really not about living longer. And that's nice, right? You get to live an extra 10 or 20 years, but that's not the big point. It's all of those 10 or 20 years. It's the quality of life that you're living. And it's a huge difference to be fit, to be in good shape, to have some strength, and to have a clear mind. That makes your quality of life just so much better. Life so much more enjoyable. You can connect so much more deeply with people than if you're in a fog and it's constantly, you know, gee, I wonder if there's any snacks. You know, you're always having a problem, you know, and instead of interacting, you're looking for snacks. You know, it's just a different, it's subtle in all the little changes that take place in your life, but it's a quality of life issue. That's the reason for good health. It's the quality of life that it gives you. But people who haven't had healthy eating habits for decades and decades, they don't really know what they're missing. As far as they're concerned, well, they're doing fine. They really don't have a problem. They're getting along just fine. But once they get healthier, they feel so much better. It's like it's fun getting up in the morning and getting started because you feel like you're full of energy and every day is another opportunity to excel. You know, you have that kind of really positive attitude, whereas otherwise you drag your body out of bed like, oh, God, another day. Well, I guess we'll get through this one too. You know, and you kind of have that attitude, and the difference in quality of life between those two, you know, attitudes is huge.
Yep. So that's it, right? Our addictions really have to do with when we feel uncomfortable and we look for something to make us feel comfortable. And well, the one thing a lot of people go for, because our parents kind of rewarded us with, well, if you're good, you can have a cookie, or you can. Mm-hmm. So sugar was one of those. It's definitely the one drug that is the most socially acceptable and the most difficult to get out of your body, just because it's so prevalent in everything, as you said. You know, I mean, I would never get a bread that has sugar in it, but there are so many breads that have sugar in it, but I wouldn't get a bread. So I'm, pushing at it. But I did get a keto bun that's made out of almond flour and flax seeds, and that was pretty good. But yeah, you have to find something. Like if you're really craving something, these days it's almost easy to find something that will substitute. I can't do sugar alcohols. That I think it's because some of the sugar alcohols are based from birch, and that's like my one allergy. But oh my goodness, sugar alcohol and me does not get along. So a lot of people will use that. Stevia is the only one, I think, the only alternative sugar that kind of is okay for me. But
yeah, I've tried them all, because people will, they'll get into stevia, and what's the other one? Agave.
Oh, agave, but the agave is really sweet.
And
stevia can taste sweet too, but agave, that's almost a sugar.
And I've tried them all, and they all cloud my mind.
Is that right? So stevia too.
Yeah, the only one that doesn't cloud my mind is barley malt, and only in small quantities. If I were to take a teaspoon of barley malt, that would mess up my mind. That's way too much. But if you have barley malt as an ingredient, then, and you don't really get too much of it all at once, that does not cloud my mind. That's the only form of sweetener that I've run across that in small amounts isn't a problem.
What about?
And I think that's because you have to digest barley malt.
Right.
It's not in a form that's pre-digested. It doesn't surge into your bloodstream. And as long as it just percolates into your bloodstream a little bit at a time, then it's not so much a problem because it doesn't make your glucose levels unstable. So it's that, how long does it take that to get into your bloodstream, and then how slowly does it leach in as you digest it? That, to me, seems to be the key.
I think because you're so clean, you can feel the effects probably much more than most people.
That is no doubt true. And, most people, like I say, when, what most people think of as bread, I think of as cake. It actually tastes really sweet to me if I get some by accident. I mean, it's just a really sweet flavored, and most people who are making a sandwich don't feel like they're eating cake. To them, there's a big difference between cake and bread.
But it breaks down to sugar anyway, so
very quickly.
All breads will break down to sugar.
Right, they do. But if they do it slowly enough,
okay,
then that's not so bad. So it's the rapidity with which that sugar gets into your system is what actually makes your system and your secretion of insulin from the pancreas, those two things just interacting with each other all the time. Your whole system is like that. Your muscles depend on everything in your body for working depends on the glucose levels. And when the glucose levels are unstable, then a lot of your body functions are unstable. A lot of your glandular secretions are unstable. Glucose is one of those fundamental things in your body. It's all your starches end up as glucose. That's what starches do. Right. I shouldn't say starch. That's what carbohydrates do. All your carbohydrates end up as glucose. Right. But some quicker than others. And the ones that are pre-digested and go instantly into your blood, those are the ones that cause most of the problem. And that's your honey and maple syrup and, all of the basic different forms of natural and unnatural sugar. And the artificial sugars, like you say, they're even worse. Yeah. They have their own set of problems. We went through it back when I was a kid. I remember where saccharin came out. It was like a miracle, better living through chemistry, and saccharin came out, and now you could reduce your sugar and take saccharin instead, and it would still taste sweet, and you could avoid taking sugar. Well, then they found out, 20 years later, that saccharin was a carcinogen and that it was killing people. So they took saccharin off the market, and they made another sugar substitute. And then 20 years later, they found that also was killing people. So they took it off the market and they found another one. And it's gone through 7 or 8, 10 of these substitutes. And every time they put a new substitute out, everybody goes, oh, yeah, this is great. And they'll eat it. And 25 years later, they find out it kills people. It's not healthy. And then it either goes off the market or people don't use it as much. But then a new one comes out. So it's like we don't mind eating things that are untested.
Right.
We won't eat.
The thing is that it still makes your body think you're eating sugar. So you're still getting all the bad things from the sugar. Only it's even worse because it's been like hurting, because it's something completely artificial, and your body's going, well, what is this?
Right.
It's sweet. So we better throw a whole bunch of all the hormones to get, to bring down your blood sugar, but there's not really going in your blood sugar, but now it's going to affect your brain, and it's like crazy. Exactly. It's like your body doesn't know what to do with it because it's not natural.
Yeah. It has its own problems. Right. Yeah. So the artificial sugar is even a worse thing. People feel like they're being healthy by drinking sodas with aspartame or something else in it. And they might as well just eat the sugar. Yes, it'll mess up their body and mess up their mind, but it doesn't have all the foreign stuff that will make them ill later on in life.
Well, this has been an interesting show.
about food. Well,
about food, about our addictions, about all the things that can affect our mind, which is a really interesting way to look at things. And again, it brings us back to what's your intention? Is your intention, where does it come from? Does it come from fear? I mean, with the intentions that you have, some people could see it from a fear base, or they could see it from a place of, this will make me healthy, or it will make me more clear-headed, or it will make me, feel better. So it's taking it maybe out of that necessarily a mental space and trying to find, more of a balance, and because you know what your intentions are. So it's interesting, because I think when we do come to the new year, I mean, these are the things that we look at. And so this, has given me further things to think about as I, look at my health and where I want to go. And I think a lot of people can see it the same way if they're looking at, any addiction, any New Year's resolution. They're all, I mean, we know that there are some people that will, substitute something bad for something that could be good, but because they like exercise, some people, they go crazy on exercise to the point where it's unhealthy for their body because they're no longer getting, I guess, the nutrients that they need. And, they're looking at it from the wrong perspective, and they've used that as an addiction. So they're still, they're still going from a fear base that is just as unhealthy. I mean, it affects your, it affects your hormones. It does wonderful things, but it can also do, things that aren't beneficial.
Sure. Well, too much exercise, exercise stresses your body.
Right.
And your body needs a little bit of stress here and then. Your muscles need to be used. It's a use it or lose it. But if you overdo it, then it's just over stressing your body, and it's not a good thing. So I say, don't be obsessed about any of this stuff, and know what you're doing and why you're doing it. If you're going to exercise, don't just do it because you think you should. Do it because you really, really want to.
Or you like it. There are a lot, you can't, it's impossible not to find something that you actually like. I mean, sure, there are going to be days, in the winter, the ice, or, I don't know, some big storms that you're not going to want to walk outside. But in most cases, I mean, if you walk properly, walking is an excellent exercise. And if you do it and you enjoy it, like, I have a lake right by me. So I have a boardwalk that, with big trees. And right now there's, all the Christmas lights are out, and, they decorate, I don't know, I think they decorate 15 trees this year on the boardwalk. So, going down there, it's beautiful. It's beautiful at night. It's beautiful during the day because you got the lake. I mean, you can find something that you enjoy. And some people, I was never a competitive sport person, but there are so many things around that if it's something you really love, like I love swimming. I only like swimming in a lake or an ocean, but don't give me a pool because that's just not my thing. But so maybe that's kind of a limited love. But I mean, even then, there are times when I would be so hot from the humidity and think, oh, I need to do something. It's like, why don't you go for a swim, Laurie? Because that's something you really love to do. It's like, oh yeah. Like, it's so silly, but like sometimes we get so caught up in, I don't know, feeling uncomfortable, feeling miserable, feeling like you just don't want to do anything, that you forget what you really love.
Yeah. Well, that's, when we get to the point where we don't really want to do things because they're too much trouble, that's really a very mild version of depression.
Yeah.
That's really, it's not necessarily what you'd call clinically depressed, I guess, but that's the beginnings of depression. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I could go swimming, but it's an awful lot of trouble. I'd have to change clothes and put on a swimsuit, and then I have to water, and then I get wet, and then I need towels, and I need this, and I need that. And it's just too much trouble. And people feel that way about their exercise. Okay, my exercise is I run on a treadmill, or I, go out and walk on the boardwalk, or I do stuff. And they just feel, yeah, okay, I should exercise. It just seems like too much trouble. Not today. I just don't feel up to it today. I'll do it tomorrow. And of course, you don't do it tomorrow either. And pretty soon you don't do it. Well, when you find yourself in that mode of everything is too much trouble, that is depression. And the reason you feel depressed is because of all that ego and belief and fears are overtaking your life, and it leaves you in a depressed kind of a state because you can't seem to ever get out of it. Life is a struggle, and the struggle never ends. It just goes on and on and on, and you solve one problem, say, oh, I just got a raise. That's wonderful. And you feel great for the next, 3 or 4 or 5 months, and after that you're right back where you were. So that depression that people have, that being stuck in a rut, exercise is just too much trouble. It's, then I have to go sweat, and I have to put on different clothes, and then I have to take a shower, and just, by the time you do all that, it's just not worth it. I think I'll take a nap instead, or I'll go watch TV, or, I'll call up my friend and we'll go to the bar or something. You do something else. And that laziness is not really laziness. It's a problem of depression. And your whole life will end up being this low-grade depression if you don't wake up and get out of that. And then what you will find is, when you exercise the first time, you'll go, boy, that was a lot of work, and you don't feel better immediately. But if you keep doing it, in 6 months or so, that exercise will become fun. You look forward to that exercise. Now something comes up that you can exercise, and you miss it. You say, oh, all right, I really would like to go exercise. That would just make me feel so much better. So it's hard in the beginning to kind of turn that depression around. And once you get it turned around, your life again, your quality of life goes up. You're not only exercising, but you're having fun exercising. It's good. It feels good to work those muscles, to move, dance, put on a record, dance to it. That doesn't require, a nice warm sunny day. Put on a record and go dance with yourself, and just whatever. Have fun, work, move. But exercise needs to become fun, needs to become something that you enjoy doing, not something that you suffer because it's good for you. Right. The suffering route, that's the depressed route, and that won't last. Yeah, life has to be fun. And the things that are good for you and healthy, they are fun. If you get the right attitude and the right, if you're working out of them at a being level, you're not doing it because you think you should, you're doing it because you really want to, it becomes fun. So, there's your alternative. You can either have fun and really enjoy life and not be depressed, or you can just kind of keep slogging on through life one day after another, and there's not really a whole lot of joy in any of it. And exercise is too much trouble, and a little bit of sugar is not going to hurt you anyway. And besides, that soda and that beer and all that stuff, tastes good and it's comfort food, so you do it anyway. Well, that's a pretty low quality of life, even though that's the way most of us live all the time. There's another way that's a lot better, but it takes courage and it takes commitment to get there. But once you're there, it doesn't take that much courage or commitment. It's fun. You enjoy living, like you enjoy your walks. It's not something you do because you feel you have to. It's something you do because it's fun and it's healthy.
Right. I wish my camera was bigger and you could see, as you've been talking about this, my little girl has been whipping around the living room with a toy, just saying, yeah, I'm having fun.
Absolutely.
Little crazy girl. Anyway, well, I think this has been a good show. It's been an interesting way of looking at why we do things. And I think that's the important part of this. So this has been News for the Heart with Tom Campbell. You can find Tom at mybigtoe.com. There are hyphens in between, but I believe if you just put in My Big Toe, you'll definitely find him. Mm-hmm. And check out his YouTube. I will look forward to everyone that is going to the UK immersion. I'm in the first one, so hopefully I get to see and meet some of you. I know some of the ones that are going that I'm looking forward to meeting, and that should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Yes, it's going to be a lot of work. It's an immersion, so it's going to be a lot of work, but going to learn a lot, and it's going to be fun at the same time.
Cool. All right. Well, I wish everyone an amazing new year. Should be an interesting year. It's not supposed to be quite as dramatic as this past year, but I think it's going to be a good one. So I look forward to it. of course, Tom and I will continue doing shows. We won't have another one until February, but that's the way it is. So I look forward to it. And Tom, thank you very much again. Love having you on the show.
Thank you, Laurie. My pleasure to be here.
Have a question for Laurie and want to be on the next News from the Heart show? Drop us a line via instant feedback at bmajor.org. News from the Heart is brought to you by Intuitive Soul and is produced by Major Radio for Clear Channel's iHeartRadio and bmajor.org.